We're going to kick off with Joseph Kotrie-Monson, who is a lawyer and broadcaster and has been looking at what's been going on in the news from the eyes of a brilliant legal eagle. Joseph, lovely to see you again. It always is lovely to see you, and we've got so much to talk about this week. I mean, just looking at the headlines, I was like, where do we start? So let's look at Andrew Malkinson. He's the man who was wrongly jailed for 17 years. There's so much about this story I want to ask you about. Just to remind people, if they can't remember, this is a man who was locked up for 17 years for a rape he did not commit. The 57-year-old was found guilty of raping a woman in the Greater Manchester in 2003. And the following year, he was jailed for life with a minimum term of 7 years. This is where it gets interesting from my point of view. He stayed in prison for another decade as he maintained his innocence, insisting he would not, quote unquote, falsely confess to abhorrent crimes which he did not commit. His barrister, Edward Henry Casey, said that Mr. Malkinson was released from jail in December 2020, but was under close watch by police, and his name was still on the sex offenders register. So many questions. Forgive me for being somewhat naive, Joseph, but I would have thought if somebody was maintaining their innocence for that long, they're punished by their sentence being extended. Why would you just not say, all right, then I'm guilty, and just do the 7 years? I mean, that's just one of many questions I've got about this.
Well, you're right, Trisha. What a week it's been for legal stories in the news. I don't think we'll have enough time together, but poor Andrew Malkinson, 10 years extra on his 7 years life sentence. Why? Because he refused to resign himself to a lie. Because he would have been regarded as not a danger if he admitted something that he did not do. And Trisha,
it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. It makes sense.
It's the catch-22, and that's why. And the reason why is this: our system relies on the fact, or assumes the following premise: if you are convicted, it is fact. That is what happened. It's why the Court of Appeal won't go behind a jury's decision, even if it's wrong, unless the judge made a mistake in terms of the admissibility of evidence or other procedural irregularities. But I have to say, Trisha, the blood-curdling, the anger-inducing aspect of this story, as somebody who has practiced law all his professional life in Salford, where this incident happened, and where this man was accused when he hadn't done it. This is not a story about a miraculous DNA breakthrough leading to a man's acquittal. It's a story about disclosure failures of an errant and arrogant, and I say this reluctantly on my own patch, Greater Manchester Police investigation team, which withheld evidence, presumably in good faith. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. But this is what they did, Trisha. Get ready for it. 2 witnesses they managed to produce at short notice, who tipped this non-existent case into an identification case, claiming to have seen the immediate run-up, just so happened to be there in the immediate build-up. But you know what? These 2 witnesses, one of them had been promised some type of, promised or later received some type of leniency in respect of massively serious drugs and motoring and being on the run charges, failure to surrender charges. And they were both heroin addicts. Despite that, the police presented them, and the prosecution presented them in court as independent, reliable people. And on that basis, an innocent man was convicted. And guess what? Up until after the death of one of these heroin addicts, and I say nothing disparaging about the scourges of addiction and whether it makes you a bad person, but these were not reliable people. The jury should have found out only after their death, after 17 years. Even the Criminal Cases Review Commission knocked this poor man, this poor innocent man back twice. I have to say, this case, absolutely horrific. And you know what? As heroic, brave, and honest at the cost of 10 years of his life, Andrew Malkinson wore on a T-shirt, innocent as he came out of the Court of Appeal.
But Joseph, you know the other thing. Let me tell you the other thing that I'm amazed at. You know, what about getting compensation? Because I didn't understand that even if you get through, right, you have all the charges against you dropped, as in this case. Yeah. He still hasn't received a declaration of innocence from the Court of Appeal. Without that, he can't claim compensation. And if he does claim compensation, he says he may well be charged for food, board and lodging for all the years he spent in prison.
I tell you what,
that
Trisha,
makes sense.
Not just maybe. They do the calculation, they tot it up, they take it away, and they give you your maximum of £1 million, because that's all you can have for a lifetime of ruined expectations, a lifetime in prison, in his own words, terrified every night that he was going to be killed or attacked.
But Joseph, they charge you food and this is when I read this. They charge you board and lodging for the time that you were in prison, when you said you were innocent, when they had DNA, finally got DNA proof. They were, absolutely. But they charge you for locking you up when you were innocent.
And this is the logic. Well, we've taken away your life, but you saved money on food and rent. So we'll take that off if you don't very well mind. It's a House of Lords decision going back a few years. I think after all this uproar, righteous uproar, I have to say, objectively speaking, I suspect we may see political involvement in terms of righting this inappropriate decision of the House of Lords, now the Supreme Court. So it's quite an old decision anyway. Because it really doesn't reflect the public mood, does it?
I just can't get it. So if you're falsely imprisoned, you will have to pay for your wonderful food and board. The fact that you were terrified out of your life, the fact that you've lost everything, you're probably, in many cases, your relationships. People have, trashed your reputation is gone. And there will still be people saying, no smoke without fire. Everything's gone. Yeah. But we want to pay you, we want you to cough up for the board and lodging.
There isn't
this world.
There isn't a price for the amount of harm that has been caused to this man. And I hope that when we hear about the Lord Justice Holroyd's report, which will come out on these issues of disclosure, that we are also informed that the relevant officers have been suspended and are facing investigation. They cast doubt on our whole system. There needs to be rules and independence about how information like this is disclosed. The police are deciding what to give to the defence, and they're on the other side. They are their own referees, and occasionally they are either outrageously sloppy or, sadly, they cheat.
Wow. And there are lots of, before everyone goes mad, lots and lots of good police, but you can just see what a few rotten ones do. Let's move on. Chief Constable Will Kerr. This is switching to the other side. Chief Constable Will Kerr was suspended over misconduct claims. Now, he's the Chief Constable of Devon and Cornwall Police. He's been suspended following allegations of misconduct, which kind of followed him over from Ireland. I have to say that in a statement on Wednesday, he's said he denied any allegations of criminality. Mr. Kerr joined Devon and Cornwall Police in December, where he is subject to a separate investigation. Now, these are, he's being investigated over serious allegations of sexual offences in Northern Ireland, where he was a police officer in Northern Ireland for 27 years. Now, Joseph, again, the bit that jumped out at me, and that I've kind of highlighted in my notes, and we've heard this before. As I say, he's vigorously denied the claims, but he's denied any allegations of criminality. That phrase All I'm saying, it's cropped up a lot. It's cropped up in reports of like Dan Wootton. It's cropped up with Philip Schofield. It's cropped up in many, many cases that there is a denial of anything criminal. They're saying, well, we haven't done anything criminal. So there's a difference, isn't there, obviously, between morality and criminality. And when it comes to well, it seems, but the distinction seems to be made. Some lawyers who are advising them are obviously saying, say you didn't break the law.
Absolutely. And
there's a difference, isn't there?
Yeah, and Trisha of the Bailey, I think on this occasion, you may or may not have something, but I think we need to be incredibly careful. These are the types of words that can point to a statement that has been crafted by lawyers and correct. Didn't we identify specifically in the Schofield case just a few weeks ago that that there was absolutely that kind of tone of formality in some of the statements that were coming out, apparently written by him? And I think we're probably on safer ground here. Having said that, this is a police officer. For him to say allegations of criminality might be how he would regard as appropriately precise. And I think we're really at risk of, if we're not careful, of over speculating. And, I'm a defense lawyer. I can't be going around moaning about the police and saying, well, they don't do this right and they don't do that right on the occasions that they do. And then when a senior police officer is accused, turn into Judge Joseph rather than criminal defense lawyer extraordinaire Joseph. And the reality is, we need to see where this is going. We must be very careful. I believe, as I believed when everybody was going around the vultures, and even the website and the publication, The Vulture, circling around Kevin Spacey, that people should be innocent until proven guilty. I think that Chief Constable Kerr should be afforded the same rights.
I agree. We've got to take a break, but after the break, and you mentioned Kevin Spacey, that's one of the verdicts that we'll be looking at. Stay with us here on TalkTV. Well, if you're a little bit confused, because I'm not on air from one, I've changed time slots, but I'm here with you. I'm also here with looking at the news through the legal eagle's eyes with Joseph Kotrie-Monson. Let's move on to Kevin Spacey. Lots of headlines about him this week. The US actor was acquitted of 7 counts of sexual assault, 1 count of causing a person to engage in sexual activity without consent, and 1 count of causing a person to engage in penetrative sexual activity without consent. Here's what Kevin Spacey had to say after being acquitted of those charges.
But I would like to say that I'm enormously grateful to the jury for having taken the time to examine all of the evidence and all of the facts carefully before they reached their decision. And I am humbled by the outcome today.
That's Kevin Spacey. Now, just to remind you that by law, all complainants are entitled to lifelong anonymity. There were suggestions from Mr. Spacey's defense that maybe these individuals were looking for fame or for money and what have you. Joseph, coming back to you, he still faces, I don't know what the correct legal word is, but is there not a civil case still yet to come? Because I'm interested in what we saw there and justice having run its course, but that people can still take you into yet another court, a civil court. I don't know if everybody understands that. Just explain that to us.
Okay, well, first of all, criminal proceedings. Innocent until proven guilty, beyond reasonable doubt, is the standard of proof the prosecution have to reach. That's important, and we'll talk about how that alters when you get into a civil claim, which is a claim for money, not for your freedom. And the claim for money is by an individual. The claim for your freedom, of course, by the police, the CPS, and the state. And of course, we had that frenzy around 5 years ago, didn't we? With Kevin Spacey, we had those articles. I think we mentioned the publication Vulture, BuzzFeed, all of those people, however, in those stories, which torpedoed or at least put on serious hiatus Mr. Spacey's career. Well, they were anonymous for the most part, but you're right. There are some civil proceedings which are outstanding. Now,
and Joseph, sorry to interrupt there.
Yes.
When you bring a civil proceeding, are people still anonymous, or do they have to sort of present themselves?
It depends on the jurisdiction, and in civil proceedings in the UK, anonymity can be provided. However, as far as the civil proceedings are concerned, the standard of proof that has to be reached by one party is just more probable than not. The balance of probabilities. That means as the scales go, you've got 51%, 49%. That means that somebody knows what actually happened, not the 99.9% or beyond reasonable doubt that you associate with criminal proceedings. And that's important because here we say constitutionally, Kevin Spacey is an innocent man because his character is unimpeached, having as a resident of the UK. I don't think he's a citizen, so not a subject, but he has that right to be regarded as an innocent man. However, you see in libel cases, which are on civil proceedings, on the balance of probabilities, easier to prove one way or the other. So there's an issue here, isn't there? Or a distinction to be drawn between the PR battle on the one hand, the legal battle on the other. Well, actually, the legal battle in respect of criminal liability, it's hard to prove. And he won that case. But harder to do in civil proceedings, and of course harder to do in the public eye. I must say this, however, there were 4 complainants. I want to impress upon you, Trisha, in our legal conversations, we've never talked about this so far. And that's that once you have, and it goes without saying when you think about it, once you have multiple complainants who are unrelated, all saying you did something similar, the chances of fancy defense lawyers getting you off, if you are in fact guilty, go right down. These cases from the defense point of view are almost impossible to win, and that increases the more complainants you have. The implication from that is this is a case that never should have been brought. It looks very much as if this case was brought in reaction to that frenzy, in the context of that fervor, and I hesitate to use words like or phrases like witch hunt, but it looks very much like this is the type of case that was about profile. This was a case built around Kevin Spacey rather than around genuine complaints, because this should have been a tap-in. This should have been an easy win for the prosecution. Clearly their case just didn't stack up.
Yeah, it's going to be, it's not over for him. I mean, he lost House of Cards. It's not over for him. I mean, it's the first step. But as you say, the next battle, as it were, is going to be far more difficult. Moving on now, talking about battles again and again and again. Suella Braverman broke the law by denying asylum seekers a £3 a week judge rules. Now, on the face of it, people go, so what? But then when I read, it meant unlawfully failing to provide basic support for asylum seekers, including young children and pregnant women. So they couldn't afford food or vitamins while they were pregnant. Whatever anybody thinks about asylum seekers, the unborn children and infants are nobody's to blame, I don't think, but in the most hardened minds, little children and babies and unborn children shouldn't be tortured, basically, because that's what one of the words that's been used. Now, 3 of the claimants brought proceedings over delays in providing financial support, 2 challenged over failures to provide cash payments to pregnant women and to children under 3 years old. Now, in his ruling, Mr. Justice Swift found that the Home Secretary broke the law in withholding payments of £3 a week to provide healthy food for children aged 1 to 3 and to pregnant women. So this isn't, this is about the most vulnerable, also elderly people. And when you really read through all the judgments, some of the stories, very elderly people refused things. £3 a week. mean, it might seem miserly to anybody else. I mean, how you can do that, but it is apparently makes a difference between a pregnant woman being able to get proper nutrition to babies and what have you. And this goes on and on and on, but also the amount of money that the government is spending in all of these things, challenging all of the things, is basically what's it up to? Something, how many millions? And you sort of think, well, you could have invested that in the civil servants so you could process migrants to the level where this wasn't an issue some 12, 15 years ago. This is all about politics and PR. And every time the government does something like this, we, the taxpayer, never mind moaning about the people in small boats, we're spending far more on every time the government does this, which their legal advisors, Joseph, must tell them they haven't got a hope in hell. They must tell them that. And yet they go ahead with it and spend more of our millions. Why aren't people protesting about that? I am. Sorry.
Oh, Trisha, it's a broken record, isn't it? We talk about this every few weeks in this sorry set of proceedings. Rwanda, the hostile environment, trying to create some kind of scenario which plays to the stalls on that demonstrates somehow that this is a government that can be cruel to people, and that somehow makes us feel sure that the tragedy of migrants on boats is going to stop. I have to say this. Let's forget the politics. Let's even forget the law just for a minute, unusually, Trisha. And let me put this proposition. And I just think that everybody would agree with the following statement. If you willfully deny necessary supplies to pregnant women and newborn children, no matter what they've done, and the newborn children haven't done anything, you are a bad person. You're doing bad work. This is shameful. The fact that this required a high court battle with expensive, privately funded lawyers in the pay of the government at our expense to somehow demonstrate that is, I just think it's mind-boggling. It seems that this is, and now we're back into Joseph mode. So, you know.
But I hear you. But Joseph, because we've got to finish this up. My final question to you, and I do this with big Bambi eyes. Now, the government has access to the top legal minds who would have said, you haven't got hope in hell.
Yeah.
And yet they spend millions, because it's now up to millions of taxpayers' money. And before people say, oh, you live in the States, you don't pay tax. I pay British tax. I pay British tax as well. But they're told they won't win. And yet they still spend millions for a headline.
Trisha, they know they're going to lose, but they lose fighting for something that a small proportion of their base feels really strongly about, is really vocal about in the YouTube comments and on Twitter, and look at their bio pictures, and they don't care, and we're paying for it.
Joseph, I think that everybody who believes that who stands with the government in the way they're doing things, I'm talking about the way they've gone about it, those people should be signing up and paying towards these lawyers. Only the people who say, yes, the government's doing the right thing. Fine, put your money where your mouth is and pay every time the government goes against their legal advice, goes into court and costs us millions. That would stop it. Joseph,
do you know what?
Don't you agree? I mean,
absolutely. And you know what? They bemoan the legal aid lawyers on 50 quid an hour to represent people who might be going to prison. But this nonsense, they'll spend 600 quid an hour for top King's Counsel on a fight that they know they're going to lose just for a headline in the Daily Express.
Joseph, I'm sure it'll come up again. There's loads of other things we didn't get to talk about, but I know they ain't going away. So we'll see you again soon. Love talking to you. That's Joseph Kotrie-Monson there.